As the screen tells us, our topic for the next few weeks is going to be Ahab, Jezebel, and Elijah. We actually have read this in our readings recently. I think it's a wonderful story, has some incredible lessons that we can apply to our own lives. It gives us insight into the world of the Israelites in the northern kingdom. Sometimes we can overlook that because it is, and rightfully so, it is heavily focused on Jerusalem in the southern tribes, because that is from, the house of David, and that is where the promise of the Messiah is going to come. But the northern kingdom, during its heyday, was pretty substantial. If you look at this map right here, you can see that for all intents and purposes, it was almost double the size of the southern kingdoms. Obviously, that makes sense, right? Out of the 12 tribes, 10 of them are going to go up to the north. The northern tribes are going to be their own kingdom, and the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And you can see as well, the northern kingdom, they have access to the sea. They had seaports, which is going to help them prosper a lot more than the southern tribes. If you look at that, do they have access to the sea? No. Who's blocking them from the sea? Yeah, so they're blocked from, having ports. Now, this is going to change during the time of Christ. They're going to have access to the Mediterranean. But the northern kingdoms are going to be the kingdoms that have access to the sea, to the wealth of the Mediterranean as well. I'm not saying Jerusalem was like a backwater kingdom, because it wasn't. They still, they still made money through trade and stuff like that. But the northern tribes are going to be larger, bigger armies, bigger economies, and they're going to have access to more wealth than the two tribes of Judah and Benjamin. For the southern kingdom was landlocked, and listen, there's plenty of landlocked countries that do very well, but having access to the sea, particularly during this time, was very important for economic and cultural growth. And that's one of the reasons why the northern kingdoms economically was more successful than the southern kingdoms. Their major kind of allies and also adversaries were the Phoenicians up north. The Phoenicians were known for being sea traders, and also Aram, which was an ancient name for Syria. Is Syria still around? Yes. Is it in the same spot? Yes. Is Israel and Syria still contending for land? Absolutely correct, yes. So we're going to be focusing on the northern tribes, looking at the cultural differences, the religious differences with the southern kingdoms, and also eventually we'll get to, after we kind of set the stage here, we will get to Ahab, the house of Ahab. And it's not going to be called the house of Ahab, it's actually going to be called the house of Omri, because Omri is going to be one of these great kings of the north of Israel that we don't really know a whole lot about. First Kings and Chronicles gives us a little bit of insight, but if we look at the archaeological record, we find that Omri did some pretty significant things. The biggest thing was he is going to build up Samaria into a pretty good-sized city with fortresses and stuff like that. So anyways, so we know the general history of this split, right? Around 930 BC, after King Solomon's death, the united monarchy is going to split into two political and religious areas, the north and the south. We know that Solomon's reign was an incredible reign, as we're going to get a look at. But he did it at a price. If we look at the account in 1 Kings, we find out that there was heavy tribute placed upon not only the foreigners that were living in Israel, but also the Israelites themselves. They actually had to take time out of their year to go and help Solomon build all of his buildings. He was a great builder, and he built up in the north, he built down in the south. I think it was like every 3 months or something like that, they had to go and become workers for nothing. And this obviously upset particularly the northern tribes. They felt that they were doing all of the work for Jerusalem, for the house of David. We're doing all the work so you can become rich and famous, while we're the ones really building all of these monuments that you love so much. And so there was resentment. And this resentment is slowly going to build up, as we're going to see. It was by the hand of God, obviously. That scripture, says that it's going to be a split. But it's really fundamentally going to change the history of the Israelites in the north and the Israelites in the south. Samaria is going to be the capital, and the Samaritan woman is right in this whole area up in the north. And Samaria is going to be a euphemism for the northern tribes. In 1 Kings and in Chronicles, they mention Samaria as kind of being, or Ephraim. Ephraim as well is going to be. But yes, Samaria, this area is still going to be around during the time of Christ. There's still going to be animosity as well between Jerusalem and Samaria, or the north. The north was always an area of darkness. It's where all the bad stuff happened, right? The further you got away from Jerusalem, the worse it got, right? That's why the Galilee was always looked down on by the people that lived in Jerusalem, like the backwater Galileans. Always a problem up there. So, yeah. Yes, Jim?
I would just qualify, Rich, and you can explain it, that the Samaritan woman was not a northern Israelite.
Oh, yes, correct. Let me explain that. Yes, the Samaritan woman most likely was the descendants of people that were brought in by the Assyrians to re-inhabit the north. So ethnically, she was not an Israelite or a Jew. She was from some other ethnicity from in and around there that had been brought into the north by the Assyrians. Remember the Assyrians? They brought all the people in there, but they were getting killed by lions. And they're like, we got to bring one of the priests of Yahweh into this land to teach them. Because if they don't know the ways of Yahweh, he won't let them live in the land. And so they brought one of the priests from the Jeroboam idolatry, from the north, brought them in here, and that's where we get the religion of the Samaritans. They knew all the history of the Jews, but they had different ideas as well. That was based upon the worship of Yahweh by Jeroboam. Remember, in the north, they did worship Yahweh, but it wasn't by the Levites, and it wasn't in Jerusalem, and they allowed all kinds of other things to go on as well. So when you say about the north, the sin that made Israel to sin, how many times is that referenced? A lot. And it references back to Jeroboam, who took away the north's ability to go to Jerusalem every year, as we're going to see. And he set up his whole religion. It wasn't a new God. They still worshiped Yahweh, but they had their own rituals, their own routines. They took the seat of religious authority from Jerusalem and put it in Dan, and they put it in Bethel as well. Okay? So, that sets the stage. Any other questions before we move on? All right. So listen, this little area of Israel, I actually, speaking of Israel, I talked to Jason yesterday. So he's doing fine, He's like he's down in Florida. He sent me some pictures. It looks like they're having a nice trip. So weather looks great. So he's safe. Everything's cool. In this small area about the size of New Jersey, look at all the stuff that's going on. Look at all of the kind of the people and the nations that are, the size of New Jersey. A lot of incredible stuff came out of this area, but it's a very small area, and they're packed in quite a bit, and they're always squabbling about control. All right, let's just take a look at this picture first of all. This is Solomon taking like a selfie with all of his wives and concubines. I thought that was pretty funny when I saw it. It's like, yeah, hey. And as humorous as that is, this is going to cause a lot of problems for Solomon individually, but also it's going to caused a lot of problems for the nation as well. Let's take a look at 1 Kings, the 11th chapter. I did a search for Solomon's wives, and one of the image came up like that. I'll send it to you. No, I know you. I know you honesty. All right. So if we look at the 10th chapter of Kings before, it talks about the incredible things that Solomon did, like verse 14 of the 10th chapter of 1 Kings. Now, the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666. So 666 talents of gold, 666. Is there some kind of a connection there? I don't know. But Solomon made different leagues and different treaties with a lot of these people. And he cemented these treaties through marriages. Very common in the ancient world. Very common in the Middle Ages as well, with these, very powerful families from Germany and from England marrying each other. At one point, all of the kings and queens, right before World War I, all of the kings and queens of Europe were related to each other. That's a fact. Through Queen Victoria. And so she kind of, she had a ton of kids, she had a ton of grandkids, and they would they would marry all of these people up in Europe, right? So right before World War I, all of the royalty in Europe were related to each other. And so a lot of people call it like a family war, a family squabble. So, like for instance, the King George of Great Britain was first cousins with Tsar Nicholas II. First cousins, they used to hang out. They grew up together. Used to go on summer trips and everything. Blank, major blank. Oh, the Tsar, Wilhelm II. He was the grandson of Queen Victoria. So they're all related. They would all have like family gatherings together. And no one liked poor little Willie from Germany because he was always too rough and gruff, and he used to bully people. Because his arm, his left arm was shorter than his right arm. So he was compensating constantly for the fact that he had a short, withered arm. And that was because he had a bad birth. And one of the English doctors went in there and tried to, pull him up with forceps. Sorry for the graphic name, but he messed up his arm in the process. So I just went down a major rabbit hole for no reason. This is what just happened. All right, I apologize. All right, so Solomon's going to have this incredible country. Money is coming in, very prosperous for everybody. But it was on the backs of the people, both foreigners and also the Israelites. Their tax burden was incredible. It was they were complaining about it as well. So anyways, Solomon had chariots, verse 25. All the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver, and vessels of gold, and garments, and armor, spices, horses, mules, a rate year by year. So every year they're bringing tribute to Solomon. He was one of the greatest kings in that area, probably the greatest king. And not only that, he also was a very wise man. And, the list of things that he did, he wrote all kinds of books. He was really interested in the natural world. He was interested in philosophy. He would have people come. There was almost like a philosophy school in Jerusalem. It was the go-to place if you wanted to kind of talk about things. So this was like the pinnacle of Israel's history. And it happens pretty quickly, doesn't it? You have Saul kind of fighting for control. David fights for control of this area as well. He does amazing, expands all the way up into Damascus, all the way down into Egypt, or parts of Egypt. So did incredible. Solomon comes along. It's a time of peace and prosperity. You know, I think he said that Solomon made silver as plenteous as stones or something like that, right? And obviously it's a euphemism to tell us about how wealthy Israel was at this time. Things were going great. He's getting all kinds of stuff, trading, right? He made him and Hiram, the Phoenicians, right? They're going on different excursions throughout the Mediterranean, all the way over to India as well. Yes, they went all the way over to India. They're bringing all kinds of exotic animals, all kinds of exotic spices, big money items. And this is obviously why Solomon is going to be extremely wealthy. People are going to go see Jerusalem and Solomon and his court, the Queen of Sheba. We know the story, okay? So Israel is doing fantastic. God is with them. Solomon is making all the moves, all the right decisions, because God is guiding him. What could possibly go wrong? Got it all set up. But King Solomon loved many strange women. Poof. You know, it's interesting. You look at, all of the accomplishments of Solomon, and it's almost like wiped out by this one statement. But Solomon loved many strange women. It reminds me of his father. When David had subdued all of the lands around him, he looked up, right? And he saw the city of Jerusalem, and he saw Bathsheba. It's the same thing, drew away his heart, caused him to commit adultery. Think about the terrible things that happened because of this one act. Think about the terrible things that are going to happen because of Solomon's lack of wisdom. He didn't let the wisdom of God guide him. He let his lusts, his fleshly lusts and desires guide him. And so here he was. And in fact, this is going to be a metaphor for the Jews, because Nehemiah is going to bring it up when they come back right after the exile. And they were marrying all kinds of different women during this time. And he said, you're doing the same thing that caused Solomon to sin. You're loving many strange women. And so we're talking about, now, Solomon is going to have a harem, okay? And it's really just a collection of women that, and I specifically say that, a collection of women, because really that's what it was. Solomon didn't have a close personal relationship with a lot of these women. It may have been, Solomon might not even know the names of some of these women, but it was a status symbol. 900 women are in your harem. Incredible, Solomon. But they missed their homeland. They missed the culture of their homeland. They missed the religion of their homeland. And so Solomon, being the sympathetic, loving husband, sure, go ahead. What harm? What harm could do it? But the problem was he has all of these women bringing in their religious ideas. They were from Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Amorites, Zidonians, and Hittites. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. It's the beginning. His heart was set to God. Remember when he was young, Solomon was young, and he's like, he was probably 18, 19 years old, something like that. He's like, I'm just a child. How can I go in and come out with such a great people? Give me wisdom. He's not asking God in this situation. He's just letting it happen. He's allowing the things of society to get the better of him. This was very common in the ancient world, but it took his heart away, drove his heart away from God. And he allows his wives to build temples and shrines all around Jerusalem. Let's take a look at it. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord as did his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. There's something interesting here. They set up these shrines on the hill before Jerusalem. So it was Mount Zion that they're building these things on, these shrines. And these shrines would overlook Jerusalem. In other words, here's the shrine to Molech or to Chemosh, right? Up here. Yahweh's temple is down here. What's the message? What's the visual? What's the optics? We're greater than Yahweh. We're up on the hill looking down on Yahweh. We're still the top dog. Molech, tougher than Yahweh. Baal, tougher than Yahweh. Look at where we are. We're taking over land in the land of Israel, in Yahweh's land. We're taking over, baby. This is how they looked at it. In fact, remember when Naaman was cleansed of his leprosy? What was something that he brought with him back to Syria? Anyone remember? Dirt, yeah, dirt from the land of Israel. He bought like a couple sacks full, if I remember correctly. And he did that because the land of Israel was Yahweh's land. So he was bringing a tangible aspect of Israel's land with him to lay before the threshold of his God. Remember, he says, when I go in with the king, right? Forgive me when I go down, when I bow down to him. But he took Yahweh's dirt from Israel and put it on the threshold. They did the same thing in, remember when Dagon fell down, they wouldn't step on the threshold? So it's the same type of reasoning in the ancient world. If you have a portion of a God's land, you have access to that God at all times. And so he's bringing with him actual land that had power in it. Yahweh's land with him in order to have Yahweh with him at all times. Gods and land were connected like crazy in the ancient world. There's a little thing in there too about, we might get to this, but I can't remember, it might have been with Ahab. But he said, remember the Israelites beat them in the mountains? And he says, Yahweh's a God of the mountains. Let's fight them in the plains. That's where our God is tough. Nope, God, Yahweh is God of everything. So this is the mentality, obviously. And so not only was it spiritually defiling, the physical optics of it were sending a message to the ancient Israelites as well. Solomon was sending a message. Yahweh isn't that important. Yeah, Yahweh's our God, but hey, everyone can have a God. You got a God. You got a God. You got a God. And they built them all along on Mount Zion. All right. In verse 9, and the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded. God appeared to him twice, and it still wasn't enough for Solomon to keep himself on that straight and narrow way. The world was very tempting to Solomon. But, you look at Ecclesiastes, and most people say that Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon towards the end of his life. He was kind of looking back on everything. And what does he say? Vanity of vanity, saith the preacher. All is vanity. It's emptiness. And he goes through the things. I tried to build vineyards. I tried to build houses. I built these luscious, gardens, these lovely ponds. It's all emptiness to him. But when he was younger, when he was in the mix, right? When he was dealing with the day-to-day stuff of Israel, how to make Israel strong, how to make these alliances strong, how do we how do we keep the house of David from falling? Well, this is what he did. He made all of these political deals. And in the end, it caused him his kingdom. And it's going to cause Israel to sin greatly as we go on. All right, so we'll say goodbye to Solomon here and all his wives. See you later. All right, this is just some archaeological stuff, but on the left-hand side there, this is an artist's rendition of Molech. And they would offer children to Molech. They would also offer, the worshipers of Baal would also offer children as well. Baal was associated obviously in Canaan and also up in Phoenicia, but Molech was also an important god as well. All of these gods, in order to appease them, required child sacrifice. An abomination to God. A complete abomination. And he uses that word. He doesn't say, hey, I don't like it. He says it's an abomination to him. And so, he didn't want child sacrifices in his land. He didn't want this type of worship at all. Because, you think of religion, you think of culture as well. They're tied together. And so if your culture requires you to kill your own children, that's going to have major ramifications in your culture. It's going to change your culture. On the right-hand side, you have a picture of Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth, Ishtar, all of the kind of the feminine gods, the goddesses, very powerful in the ancient Near East. They were fertility goddesses. You had the Ashtoreth pole where you would kind of dance around. There was different types of groves that they would make, that type of thing. So again, two major gods, Molech, Baal, and also Ashtaroth as well. I got you, Chris. One of the things too is Baal and Ashtaroth were married in some Canaanite texts. Okay, just FYI. Ashtaroth was Baal's consort. Chris. Yep.
This may be a little bit of a stretch, but oftentimes these themes come back around to connect. And so going back to the rabbit hole that you went down a little bit about the lead up to World War I and the relation of the kings, but many people saw that war, World War I, as kind of a, excuse my language, a pissing match between the kings who could get most of their subjects to die for them before the people would rise up. And it became really a war of attrition. What kings had sufficient power that hundreds of thousands of the people would die for them until finally we had the Russian Revolution. This same idea of offering your children unto Molech, the kings were somewhat, exhibiting that same thing, just sacrificing their people to their glory, to say that these people will die for me.
Right.
And how many did die?
Yeah.
And how that shaped the world today. That the idea of monarchies is so much pushed against.
Yeah, 100%. Millions of people died on both sides. And the Russian Revolution, tens of millions of people. So yes, do we still offer up our children in this society? I would say we do. I say, we do. In a lot of different ways. But anyway, so this was important, obviously, to the ancient Canaanites. It was important to the ancient Israelites as well. But, the Israelites were always bombarded by the culture and the religion of all the people around them. Constant, even from the time of the judges, right? They were warned about it. No. We're going to follow Yahweh 100%. Joshua, definitely. We're going to follow you. We're going to follow. Don't worry about it. What's the problem? Well, we know immediately when Joshua and the elders that outlived Joshua died, problem straight away. Okay. Now we're not going to do like a deep dive into this, but this is pretty interesting to me from a political point of view. So Jeroboam was from the tribe of Ephraim. Was Ephraim an like an important tribe or like a backwater? Definitely important tribe, Rich. Yes, correct. Butch, exactly. So it was an important tribe. It was probably the most important tribe, most populous, the strongest, and this goes back all the way to the time of Joshua. Joshua was from Ephraim, and he led the people into the land. So that's power. You have one of the great leaders of Israel coming out of Ephraim. Gideon was in this area. Remember they had the big fight with Abimelech? Abimelech is in this area. They wanted to make him king, the son of Gideon. Remember they had the big civil war? If you could say Shibboleth, Sibboleth, right? One person said it wrong, gone. And so this is where all of this stuff is happening. There's a lot of history in Ephraim, particularly during the time of the judges. Shechem is in Ephraim as well. We're going to find out that's extremely important. So Ephraim isn't some backwater. You needed Ephraim. I'll give you an example. In order for, let's say, like a Democratic candidate to win the presidency, they need California, right? They need those 54 votes, and they've traditionally voted for the Democrats, okay? That's 54 electoral votes. They need it. If they don't get the 54, it's over. And so Rehoboam was in a similar position as we're going to see. He needed Ephraim in order to be king. He's down in Jerusalem. He's got an uprising on his hands up in the north. Jeroboam has been a rabble-rouser. He started out as a servant of Solomon. He was over Ephraim. He was like the governor of Ephraim. He was the head guy of Ephraim. He oversaw the, all of the tribute, all of the workers. He oversaw all this. He was a really smart guy. He was a great manager. Perhaps some would say even kingly. But foreshadowing. He rebels against Solomon. He rebels against the high taxes. Solomon wants to kill him. Jeroboam hightails it down to Egypt, okay, which is interesting. There was another, let me see here. 1 Kings 11. Where was this? Oh, yeah. Also, Hadad the Edomite. The Lord stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. Guess where he fled to? Egypt as well. Very good, Kristen. He went down to Egypt. It seems that Egypt was a political breeding ground for enemies of Israel, or enemies of Solomon. Jeroboam's down there. Hadad the Edomite is down there as well. There was political shenanigans going on, and the Egyptians were in the mix. Egypt wanted Canaan as a buffer zone. They wanted areas that could supply them with an area that was peaceful and strong, but would keep out the northern invaders, like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Syrians themselves. Keep them out of here. We don't want them. Anyways, yeah. So they go down to Egypt. Remember, once Solomon died and Rehoboam established himself in the south, what did Egypt do? Shishak. Remember him? He attacks Rehoboam. He actually took he took all valuables out of Jerusalem. Remember the gold shields that Solomon had made? Egypt took all of them. Pharaoh took all of them. And Rehoboam was going to make bronze instead, cheaper. So Egypt is involved in this. And it seems to be that Egypt was anti-Jerusalem or anti-southern tribes and pro-northern tribes. Jeroboam was down in Egypt. He lived with the household in Pharaoh's household. Jeroboam did. Hadad the Edomite also lived with Pharaoh in Pharaoh's house. They raised him like a son. So there's intrigue here, brothers and sisters, okay? And so, sometimes when we read the accounts in Scripture, we read it and like, okay, yeah. But there's a lot of stuff that the Bible tells us. You just got to kind of slow down and maybe do a little research on the historical and cultural aspects of it. But this was a major political upheaval during this time. Solomon's building projects, his house, the temple, all of the different stable areas that he built, all of these fortresses that he built, it's going to add to his power, but it's also going to undermine his power as well, because there's going to be a lot of resentment towards the house of David for their greed and their pride. We don't think about that, but when we think about the interactions with Rehoboam and the people, right? There's some pride there. There's a lot of pride there. And so Solomon wants to kill Jeroboam, but once Solomon dies, free for all. I'll give you another example. It's kind of like when, and this is going to happen in 2028, okay? Trump can't run again. Yes, I can. Trump, right? Trump can't run again. So there's going to be a massive, there's probably going to be 12 to 15 Republicans that want to go into the primary. It's going to be a big Donnybrook. They're going to be calling, this, that, and the other. And then on the Democrat side, too, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to have 10 to 15 people running for president. And so this is actually what was happening. Once Solomon dies, it is a free-for-all. Who's going to control these areas? Who's controlling the north? Is Rehoboam going to be king of the north and south? Oh, we'll see about that. Jeroboam leaves Egypt right at this time, and he goes up into Ephraim, and he starts the rebellion. And so Rehoboam isn't stupid. He's got some counselors. Solomon's counselors was there. So Rehoboam goes up to Shechem, the king. He's leaving Jerusalem to go up to Ephraim. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. We'll look at that. Jeroboam is the leader of this rebellion, okay? And he says, look, you got to lighten the tax burden. We're getting killed here. We can't feed our families. We're gone half the year building all of your buildings. We're a little tired of it. And so Rehoboam hears them. Okay, I hear what you're saying. And so he asks his advisors, the elders, Solomon's counsel, yeah, it might be a good idea to lower their burden. Speak comfortably to them. Speak kindly to them. I hear what you're saying. Absolutely. We'll work together on this. We'll knock it down, sure. But the younger ones, they were looking for what? They were looking to establish themselves as the power. We're the guys now. I'm the guy. And they weren't, they were full of pride. They wanted that power. And they're like, you want to see taxes? I'll show you taxes. And so they're saying, look, we're not lowering your taxes. We're upping your taxes. And so not the best thing to say to people that are upset about their taxes. And so there's going to be a revolt. There's going to be a rebellion. And Rehoboam is going to lose the northern tribes. In fact, he barely escapes with his life. He's up there because Adoram, he was over the tribute. He was over the taskmaster. He was the head guy that collected the taxes and oversaw all of the workers. So he was hated. He represented everything that was wrong with this tribute system in the eyes of Ephraim and of the northern tribes. All to what? To enrich Rehoboam now? To enrich the house of David? What portion do we have in David, they said. What are we doing? They don't care for us. They're in it for themselves. There's one family down there of the house of David, and they're just putting us to work. We're going to do all of this stuff. They're taxing us to death. What are we doing? We don't have any portion with David anymore. Okay? And Rehoboam has to hightail it out of there, has to hightail it out of Shechem, or he would die too. Adoram got stoned to death, and Rehoboam almost did too, and he took off. And he luckily made it back to Jerusalem. And that's it. Okay, the 10 tribes split. Jeroboam is crowned king in Ephraim, in Shechem. There's going to be some battles, yeah. But God is actually going to stop the infighting. He said, brothers should not fight against brothers. But that isn't going to prevent, them from fighting each other. And the Kings and the Chronicles talk about that. But Israel is always going to outlast the South, just because they're going to be bigger. All right? So, the house of David is left with two tribes, Judah, of course, and also Benjamin. And we know that because, Benjamin and Judah actually were pretty tight. They were right next to each other as far as inheritance is concerned. And we know that the house of David and the house of Saul, through marriage, actually, they were close as well. Even though, at the end of the day, there was tremendous amounts of friction and death. They were close at one time. Okay. So why Shechem? It was the power base of Ephraim. We talked about this, Abimelech. It's not way up north, but it's also not, it's far away from Jerusalem as well. Jerusalem's down south. Shechem is kind of in the middle of Israel. And so, a historic place of gathering. If you want to look up Joshua 24, this is where they went to divide up the land. They went to Shechem. It's important. And of course, the need for Rehoboam to secure the north, which had been upset about Solomon's heavy tribute burning. In a certain way, and this was smart on Rehoboam's part, he was paying homage. He was going to the power base of Ephraim. Whether or not that, he wanted to show that the power of Jerusalem extends up to the north, right? The king is coming up north, but he was paying homage to them as well. All right, so this is, just very quickly, we got a couple more slides to go. In order to prevent the Israelites from coming down to Jerusalem to worship every year, 3 times, remember, 3 times a year, they would go to the temple. They had been doing this through with David, right? They went up to Jerusalem to the tabernacle. That's where the tabernacle was in that area. Excuse me. And they were doing it during the 40 years during Solomon's reign. So, you're talking about, let's just say, 60 years, conservatively, 60 years of Israelites, north and south, going to worship in Jerusalem in the temple. Okay, so that is an established routine. This is going to change with Jeroboam. Jeroboam saw the danger in allowing the northern people to come under the influence still of Jerusalem. And he said, no. Up in the north, we're going to put a little shrine. Down in the south, we'll put a little shrine right in Bethel, about 10, 15 miles from Jerusalem. You don't have to go down south to Jerusalem. These be your gods, O Israel. And they're going to set up a shrine or a small little temple in Bethel. There was a temple in Bethel. There was also a temple up in Dan. And they made the golden calf. The golden calf reappears. These are your gods. And so again, I want to reiterate, this wasn't a new God. This was Yahweh they were worshiping in their own way. Their own way. They're doing it their own way. Levites don't, no. Levites don't have to be priests. No, anyone can be a priest. Anyone can be a priest now. And so, instituted new festivals as well. Think about the law, all the festivals in the law. And so what they're doing is they're going to say, no. We got our own rituals and routines. God's rituals and routines, no. His festivals, no. We got our new ones. And so throughout Chronicles and throughout Kings, this was the sin of Jeroboam that made Israel to sin. And it wasn't, you could call it idolatry, but it was really the wrong worship of Yahweh. They were worshiping Yahweh just in their own way. And here you can go to these, up in Dan right here. This is actually the temple site or the ritual site up in Dan. And you can see it's got, a lot of time, nice trees there. It looks like a nice kind of wooded, grassy area. It's a nice area. And those are the ruins on the left-hand side. A little sketch of what it looked like as well as it stood. And there you can see the altar. They kind of made an altar on where, what the altar would look like. That's inside of the courtyard itself. And on the right-hand side, you have some of the tools that they used. The little shovels to take out the ashes off of from the sacrifice, that type of thing. They're mentioned in the law of Moses, by the way. And so you can see they're using a lot of the things found in the law, but they're doing it their own way. And it's not in Jerusalem. God put his name in Jerusalem, put his name in his temple. That's where he would dwell, he says. Jeroboam says no, for political reasons. And in a way, you can understand what Jeroboam's thinking. I don't want them going down there. Who knows what they're telling them? They can form rebellion. You can go down there. You can form a rebellion, send them back up. You got a problem on your hands. And so we're not going to do that, Rehoboam says. Rehoboam was a good leader, okay, from a secular point of view. He was a smart guy. He led Israel for like 20 years or something like that. But he was doing religion his own way. Isn't that what the world's all about today, brothers and sisters? Doing religion their own way. So we just have to, a lot of the things that ancient Israel struggled with, we struggle with as well. The fight is the same.